The meeting is about to be recorded. By the way, everything you type in the chat window is also recorded in the chat transcript, and it's available later in the recording as comment. So be careful of what you write there. Without much further ado, very quickly, so welcome. It's me, Alexander. This is our third lecture. And of course, we will start now with the official presentation. So this is already a standard procedure for us. So let's switch to the lecture now. Because I'm running dual screen, I cannot see the chat, what you make in the comments now, because now I see the presentation. So because of that, I will stop after each topic and then I will look at the chat. But if there's something really like urgent that you would like to, bring up, and you want to, Bojan is going away. Okay, Bojan, zbogom I prijetno. So that popped up as a notification. So I will interrupt. You can interrupt me. Just unmute yourselves and say whatever you would like to ask at that point. So first of all, of course, a very brief review. So we are still in the basic concepts in grammar, and we are currently on track. So we had 2 lectures. This is our third one. Our website at sites.google.com FFUNSACRS G1 and 2 is not only functional, now it's not that empty. You already have 2 lectures, you have presentations from those lectures, presentation from the practice class, and today you will have this presentation, this lecture, and you will also have actually the key from the practice classes, again as a PDF annotated with my not so legible handwriting, but you will have it. So we will continue uploading this. So very brief review. So what we did last week was slightly unplanned, but based on what what we noticed in practice classes, I think it paid off. So I presented you with 6 constituency tests. Those tests included substitution, movement questions, deletion, focalizing, and the passive transformation. And I told you how you can use them to identify sentence elements. Passive is good for objects and subjects, deletion for adverbials, focalizing for everything, substitution is also very good for almost anything, movement for adverbials, questions for everything, and it's only what I actually deleted from here, and that's emphasis that's not so useful. We also mentioned that subject, verb, complement, and object are always obligatory, even if you have a sentence where you can say, I don't know, John gave Mary a bunch of flowers, or John bought Mary a bunch of flowers, or John bought a bunch of flowers. You cannot say that Mary is optional. That's why in dictionaries we have different meanings of the words and verbs in particular. So that's actually by somebody something, and by something they are 2 different verbs in our mind. So we cannot say that the indirect object is optional because it's not the same meaning of the verb by. The only really optional element is the adverbial, but even the adverbials are like not black and white. They are in the shades of gray, but that's a phrase that now has a weird meaning. So adverbials are usually optional, but couple of them are obligatory. And we mentioned, we divided a lot of time to defining the boundaries of optionality. And we define this boundary as the meaning of the verb. So if the meaning of the sentence changes, it changes. There's nothing we can do about it. This is grammar. We don't care so much about the meaning of the sentence. colorless green ideas sleep furiously is a wonderful grammatical sentence. What we care about is its grammaticality, although it's meaningless. So when you say John kissed Mary on the cheek and John kissed Mary, of course, it's not the same. If you omit on the cheek, it starts becoming more, I guess, serious. So it's a completely different meaning of the sentence, but grammatically, it is actually the same verb to kiss. But if you say he will live in New York and he will live, the first live and the second live are not the same. So the first live is inhabit New York. The second live is to survive after a serious medical condition. And we wrapped up with something that was generally planned for the course, and that's the clause types. This is the third weapon in your arsenal of determining what sentence elements you're dealing with. So you have to memorize this, and it's not so difficult because there are only 7 of them, and you know some of these patterns even from Serbian. So every single sentence, if you forget about optional adverbials, must have one of these 7 structures. So these 7 structures are like, 10 God's commandments, but fewer in number. So this is even easier than 10 commandments. You may forget that you should not lie, but you should not forget that there are only seven clause types. So SVC, SVA, SV, SVO, SVOO, SVOC, and SVOA. If you do the sentence analysis and your sentence doesn't follow one of these patterns, of course, forget about optional adverbials, just look at the obligatory elements. So if it's not one of these patterns, something's wrong. You cannot have 2 subjects. You cannot have a complement of the subject behind the object. You cannot have obligatory adverbial before the direct object, and so on. So this is really useful. And now I can interrupt and look at the chat session. So any questions, comments? There are many unread messages. Wow, 10 commandments of Svorca. I like this, but they're actually just 7. Nema problema, Verica, ako morate da izađete, just feel free to leave. This is being recorded. You can come back. Okay, so far so good. I will go back to the lecture. So we are now officially starting the new stuff. And we are leveling up. You remember when we started talking about what we are doing in basic concepts, I told you first we will look at the sentence as subject and the predicate. Then we will look inside the predicate, and we will see that inside the predicate there's more internal stuff than just the predicate. And that's how we got to, that's how we got to Svorca. We got to identify the verb, 2 different kinds of objects, indirect and direct, 2 different kinds of complements, subject and object complement, and obligatory and optional adverbials. But in order to finish the basic concepts in grammar, now we must look inside those sentence elements, and actually somebody has to be admitted, so welcome. So we have to look inside sentence elements and see the Lego bricks of language. These are words, individual words. So what comes now is parts of speech. But I want to make a brief digression before we start talking about parts of speech. And the digression is something that you may have seen in some other, let's say, lectures, or maybe in some other YouTube videos. This is a very famous, let's say, 2-slide set to explain one important topic generally, not only in linguistics. So what you see here is the 5th Avenue in New York City. This photo was taken in the year 1900, at the turn of the centuries. I can zoom it in, and hopefully you can see some details. So I will zoom out and ask you a very simple question. Where is the car? Oh, actually, my animation messed up. So you probably see the car because I circled it. I will zoom it in, and here you are. This is the car. The only coal-powered, probably not gas-powered car. Maybe it was actually powered on peanut oil. The early cars didn't run on gasoline. They ran on coal or peanut oil. So that's the car. I also admitted somebody else. Welcome. So now comes the next slide. This is the same place, or more or less the same spot, at Fifth Avenue, from a slightly different angle, 13 years later. Just 13 years later. My question, where's the horse? So 13 years earlier, there were only horses and a single car. Now, there may be a single horse here. Can anybody see it? Would you like me to zoom in for you? So maybe this helps. Can anybody see the horse? It's very difficult.
No.
No, yes, it's very difficult to see it, also because it's black and white. So here you are. Where's the horse? The horse is here. You have to look really, really hard, and then you will notice here there's a sad head of a horse, and that was probably the last horse that operated there for some time. Nowadays there are horses, but they are the ones that are in charge of romantic rides around New York City. Of course, these days that's gone because of the coronavirus, but when things return to normal, there will be some horses again, but for different reasons. So the reason why I showed you these slides is to show you that things can change dramatically in just 15 years. Actually, this is maybe not necessary because we live in the corona pandemic, and you can see that things can change considerably in under a year. In January, we are going to theaters, movie theaters, we're throwing large parties, foam, electric dance music, events at clubs, etc. Now we have to be socially distanced, etc. But why I'm saying this is that in science in particular, it's very common, thanks to the progress of human, let's say, cognition and intelligence and constant breakthroughs in science, it's very common for things to change very rapidly. So the world sometimes changes a lot in 15 years, and we actually don't notice it because we constantly saw the change happening. For example, if you think about cell phones, but the classification that I'm about to give you hasn't changed over the last not 40, but more than 40 years. So the classification that you have here, and also SWOTSA, hasn't changed for more than 50 years. So what you have here is really something that we think is really the pinnacle of our understanding of English syntax. These are, unmutable laws. If you jump from an airplane without a parachute, you will die because there's gravity. So no matter how, defiant you are of Newton and science, you will die. There's no way to change these laws or to interpret them differently. So in other words, you are a very fortunate generation. When I was a student in 1997, I started my studies. there were some discussions still ongoing if this classification was the final one. Now it's sure, we are absolutely sure there's no other way to look at things, at least in English. So, but that means that you are not lucky in one way. You are lucky in two ways, because as Isaac Newton said, if you have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. So you have all these tools and you can do some amazing things in the future, because there are some topics in linguistics that are yet to be discovered, but now you have the tools that are fixed. So this is another nice quote. There will be a time when you believe everything we're finding out has already been found out, and that will be the beginning. So you know, previous generations, including me, are giving you these tools. Now, if you choose to do linguistics in your future careers, you can use these tools for something new and amazing. And the most important tool after svodza and subject and the predicate is the parts of speech. Since you think it's not a cool topic, it's not, you know, mind-blowing, but actually, you know, I told you, you are very fortunate. Up until 40 years ago or 20 years ago, in some ways, it was still open for discussion. So I want to show you how we got here. So how did we determine that there is a certain number of parts of speech in English, such as nouns and verbs? So I like Grand Tour and Top Gear. I like cars, although I don't have a driving license. I'm weird, but I like cars. So here are some cars. So if I ask you how you would classify these cars, anybody? Just unmute, tell me, what would be a good way to classify these cars? And I'm trying to get to the point of you understanding how we actually classified parts of speech, because when you look at words, they are also like this, you know, you have beautiful, you have beautifully, you have in, you have you have the, you have at, you have upon, you have catches, you have love. Then you have love when you say to love somebody, and this is true love. So how would you classify them? Anybody?
Many
Maybe
sports
sports
cars.
cars and non-sports cars.
Because because I'm a fan of cars, you entered my mindset. I applaud you. But without that advanced piece of information, when I do this exercise with, let's say, some high school teachers, sometimes I do like training sessions, they sometimes come with this because they are very eco-conscious. They say there are, you know, and this is not actually eco. This is more basic. Sorry, I forgot which slide was coming. They say there are, you know, like fast cars and there are slow cars. Yes, you were right. So this is the first analysis: fast versus slow cars. But some other people would say, okay, but you know, we don't know that. I don't care. As long as it moves from place A to place B, we could have a different classification, right? And for example, if I give this exercise to my daughter, who really doesn't care about cars, doesn't give a damn if she's driven in Skoda Octavia or, I don't know, Lincoln Cadillac or something like that. So she may divide them like this. You know, these are red cars. These are blue cars. This is a green car. And this is a silver car. And this is a valid classification. It depends on how much you care about cars. But somebody who's a tree hugger and somebody who, you know, thinks only about the environment, like those teachers that I mentioned at from primary and secondary school who take trainings, obligatory trainings, they say, hey, the only real classification is all these ones on the left. These cars are actually environment killing gasoline cars, internal combustion engines, and these cars on the right, they are the eco-friendly electric cars, or we call them electric vehicles, actually. So here comes the question. When you look at the words like decide, beauty, beautiful, in, science, quickly, have, breakfast, nice, at, be, and, very, truth, now, old, bring, consider, between, knowledge, true, rapidly, unwind. We can unwind after reading all these words. How do you classify them? What's the criteria? Color, internal combustion engine or batteries, speed. How did we come to this classification? As I told you, this was not a simple discussion. It took years, centuries actually, to agree on this because people had different ideas. So intuitively, if your primary and secondary teachers did their jobs correctly, you can do the classification, and you will say decide and have and be and bring and consider and unwind are verbs. Beauty, science, breakfast, truth is and knowledge are nouns. Beautiful, nice, old, true are adjectives. In, at, between, prepositions. Quickly, very, now, and rapidly are adverbs. And there are conjunctions such as and. But are these really the only ones? What about What about the? What about ouch or yikes? What about, let's say, no, there's nothing else. So what were the criteria? This is actually the part where we stand on the shoulders of the giants. What is it that makes a noun a noun? What is it that makes a verb a verb? What makes a preposition a preposition? So what is it that allows us to actually even decide how many parts of speech we have in English? By the way, in some languages there are other parts of speech, but the part of standing on shoulders of giants is that now we know the criteria, and these criteria are no longer open for discussion. So that's the amazing part. So let me show you. It's actually very logical when you think about it, and sometimes I feel embarrassed that our ancestors, linguistic ancestors, took so much time to figure this out. So let's take a look at bring, a word such as bring. You can say brings, he brings something, we are bringing something, he brought something, I think we have brought something, he's bringing everything, but you cannot say he's very bring. He's a bring, a the bring. It's a useful bring. So obviously words such as bring can take the s suffix. They are okay with being in close proximity with have and is as words, but they do not tolerate words such as useful, the, and very. On the other hand, you can take a look at the words such as science, and you can say sciences, science apostrophe s, a science, the science, a useful science. But unless you are making, you know, some comedies and making up words, you cannot really say he's sciencing or he scienced for 2 years. This is very science. We have scienced for 15 minutes in this lecture. So this is the first criterion. The first criterion, and I say it's embarrassing, but this is actually what took linguists 2 millennia to figure out, is that words belonging to the same part of speech can take the same suffixes and can be combined only with other words of a particular type. So that's why verbs such as bring can be in proximity with is and have as auxiliaries, and nouns are okay with being, you know, joined with adjectives, beautiful, event, or let's say a useful science, etc. And that's actually what this is about. But of course, if you get this in the oral exam in June, but that's far away, but I'm just starting to prepare you, you cannot say parts of speech are based on you know, which words take which suffixes and how they are combined with other words. Remember, are you going to the land of milk and honey, or you're going to the land of memory secretion and that's actually milk and insect vomit? Yes. So terminology is everything. If you're experts, you have to use the right terms. That's how you show that you're expert. So the first part, suffixes, you just use the fancy word. You call them morphological properties. Combination, you don't say, you know, this is how words are combined among themselves. No, you call it distribution properties of words, or if you want to sound even more expertish or expert-like, you say these are distribution properties of lexical items. So lexical item is a fancy expression for word. So that's it. That's actually how we got to the parts of speech that we have today. And these are the criteria that are used everywhere, from indigenous languages of Australia to indigenous languages of Alaska and everything in between. The parts of speech are nowadays determined based on morphological properties, what suffixes you can put to a word, and how you can distribute this word among other words. That's actually how you combine it. So, big question, does anybody know how many parts of speech we actually have according to these two criteria? So far, I identified, actually, if you remember the slide, I identified 6 of them. And I mentioned the, and ouch, and yikes. So probably you have part of speech for and the, and probably a part of speech for ouch and yikes, or But is there more? Is there 8? Is there 9? Is there 10? Is there 11? Okay, since you're silent, I'll tell you. So in English, we actually have 10 parts of speech. And those 10 parts of speech are the 6 which I already mentioned: nouns such as apple, verbs such as consider, adjectives such as beautiful, adverbs such as quickly, pronouns, I didn't mention them, he, she, it, prepositions like in, at, between, in front of. In front of is actually a preposition. It's not one word, it's 3 words, but it's like in front of the building. You always follow it with a noun, like you say in the building, in front of the building. Conjunctions such as and, or, but. Interjections, that's ouch, yikes, yuck. Determiners, the, etc. And we also have a special group of auxiliary verbs. So in linguistics, verbs and auxiliary verbs, they share the same word in their name, verbs, but they are considered completely different. And you can prove it because if you take a typical auxiliary verb, let's say must, it's a modal auxiliary. You will notice that it's not behaving like other verbs. For example, when you have a verb such as let's say buy, he bought a book, you cannot say he must the book. So a verb such as must, that can and could and is in he is running, they cannot live on their own. They cannot be used individually. They have to be combined with verbs that are not auxiliary verbs. And you will have this in your midterm. You will have a task where you will be given 10 sentences. In each sentence, one word will be underlined, and you will have to identify the part of speech of the underlined word. And you will get points, of course, for that. Theoretically, whopping 10 points out of 50. So it's a very important exercise. Again, the good news, you know this. You subconsciously do this. You properly analyze sentences. You have to just learn how to do it consciously. That's why we are talking about basic concepts in grammar. But of course, for your general knowledge and expertise in linguistics, I have to say a little bit more about these parts of speech. It's not just, we have these 10 parts of speech, end of story, done, next, topic in the course. There is one feature that all these groups share or do not share. And I really apologize, I wrote groups, not groups. So groups probably doesn't exist as a word. So my family members sometimes feel very embarrassed by me because I like gadgets and gizmos. So can you tell me what this thing is? Can you see it? Anybody? Any idea? It looks like a bike, but it's smaller. It's got pedals, right? But it doesn't have a seat, so I guess it's not a bike. It could be a scooter, but it uses the pedals, right? So it's not a kick scooter. So what is this thing? Any ideas? By the way, it's a mean exercise machine. It burns more calories than running and swimming. With 15 minutes of this thing, you can burn 300 calories. Okay, anybody? Well, it's called pedal flow. It's produced by the Swiss company Microscooters that you know as the producer of those cute scooters that kids push and kick. But this is done for exercising. So it's a weird name in English, it's just, corporate brand name bullshit. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word. But my daughter actually calls it pedalinet. And I like that word a lot. In Serbian, it makes perfect sense. It's trotinet that's operated by pedales. So pedalinet. Huh? So that's one feature that is important about parts of speech. So you can create new elements in some of these groups. Let me show you another example. This is a hands-free umbrella. If you want to ride your pedal flow when it rains, you will not be able to do it with an umbrella because you need both arms to keep your balance. So what you can use, if you are not embarrassed to make a complete idiot of yourself at K, is that you ride your pedal flow with this on above your head. So this is, let's say, a hands-free umbrella. But do you know what it's being advertised as? This is an American product. So this was not a Swiss product. So they came up with an interesting name. So this thing is called Nubrella. New umbrella, right? Nubrella. And this is also, how we got web and, and blog, and how we got, for example, I don't know, give me something else. Phablet, it's a phone that's as big as a tablet. That's a phablet. And we have many similar expressions throughout our modern lives. So this is actually one way to classify these 10 parts of speech. So 10 years ago, there were no blogs, podcasts, spyware, no doom scrolling was possible as, verb. But 500 years ago, If you referred to a third person feminine person, you said she. And over those 500 years, nobody came up with a new word instead of she. So all these groups can be divided into two subgroups. So all parts of speech are either open class words, where you can create new words, such as nubrela, pedalinet in Serbian, spyware, etc., or closed system words. These are words that have grammatical meaning. So they do not express normal lexical meaning, something relevant for what we are trying to say. They are simply in the sentence because they perform a grammatical function of making the sentence grammatical, making the sentence in the correct tense, etc., having the right modality. So is it command, or is it possible, outcome of a situation? So is it must or can that you will use? So those are closed system words. They do not appear, out of the blue. They are not changed. They are fixed, more or less. It's a big event in a language if one of these words changes, or if you get a new word. Can you think of a new preposition in English that entered English over the last 300 years? You can think, you can go through dictionaries. There were no new prepositions over the last 300 years. The first new pronoun was she, and that happened 500 years ago. And before that, it was hail. That was the original Anglo-Saxon pronoun for the third person feminine. So which are the open class, which are the closed class? So obviously things such as nubrela, pedal flow, you Google something up, nouns and verbs are typically open, and also adjectives and adverbs. Why? Because adjectives and adverbs are derived usually from nouns and verbs. So open class words are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, and closed system words are the rest, the six immutable ones that haven't changed over 500 years: pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections, determiners, auxiliary verbs, etc. But actually, I'm lying. We do have a new interjection occasionally. We are living in the age of, social media, texting, direct messaging, etc. So when you, for example, when you use some of those acronyms, so instead of saying I'm laughing out loud and you write LOL, that's actually a new interjection. So occasionally we do get some of these new closed system words, LOL, or if you pronounce it LOL, then it's a new interjection, but that happens rarely. There are very few examples. There are no new pronouns, no new prepositions and conjunctions and auxiliary words and determiners, etc. So how do you make these new elements, new items in open class words? You will have a whole course on this. So you use word formation techniques. So I don't want to steal the show from 2 years into the future. Very briefly, just so that we are all on the same page. So when we say word formation techniques, we think about affixation. So if you delete something, you add a prefix and then you undelete it. If you have a blog and you add ER, you're a blogger. If you are on YouTube and you add ER, you're a YouTuber. Sometimes you convert, I love muffins, this is true love. Sometimes you do compounding, web and log is a weblog. Web and log is a weblog, and then it will shorten to blog. But sometimes it takes, really something out of ordinary to find an example where the word is not created using affixation, conversion, or compounding. Of course, there's also borrowing. In Serbian, we borrow from English, but that's not word formation technique. We just borrow. So instead of bina, we say stage. And it's actually not a bad thing, whatever some people may tell you, because this makes the vocabulary rich. So in a theater, we have bina. At a concert, we have a stage. So this actually makes the Serbian language richer. We are able to express more subtle differences. But as I mentioned, sometimes, there are people who transcend rules of language and are, something happens that's really weird, and there's no borrowing, there's no affixation, no conversion, no compounding, and you get a new word. And of course, I'm talking about Donald J. Trump, who, for example, is in charge of a new English word, kofefe, right? You know this, despite the constant negative press, kofefe. And this is now defined as when you want to say coverage, but your hands are too small to hit all the letters on the keyboard. So that's not a proper definition, but kofefe is now used as, something that you messed up really. You didn't want to say. And these days, I made it black and white, but if you go to the States, and this lady should be wearing a mask, but the slogan that she's holding up is really nice. Kofefe is unprecedented. And of course, all these parts of speech, nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, pronouns, etc., they differ. So you have, for example, inside nouns, you have concrete nouns like books and abstract nouns like truth. You have in entity nouns like boat, event nouns like trip or concert, and property nouns like sincerity. You can have stative nouns or dynamic nouns, a hill. There's a hill in front of us, it will not transform itself into a Godzilla. So it's a stative noun, so it's unchangeable. Or it's a dynamic noun. If you have a kid, and the kid is really misbehaving and say, oh my God, today he's such a nuisance, pravi je daveš danas. But normally, he's a well-behaved child. So this nuisance is like a temporary, dynamic noun. And for example, for verbs, you may have, again, abstract verbs and concrete action verbs. You can have transitive, intransitive, ditransitive verbs. So most of these classifications are specific to each part of speech, but one is universal, and that one is again going to be in the test, and that's stative versus dynamic. So stative versus dynamic is something that you will also have an exercise on. You will get 5 sentences, and you will have to determine whether the whether the part of speech that is underlined is a stative one or a dynamic one. So what does it mean? Stative and dynamic is a classification of open class words. So it only applies to nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We say that a noun, adjective, verb, or an adverb is stative if it refers to something stable, unchanging. Mars. It won't disappear in the near future. When somebody is tall, the person will not shrink from one day to another. Or, condition. I have a job. It will, unless I get fired, I will have it, or unless I quit. But the general indication and the implication is he will not quit it, and he will try to keep his job. So it will be like pretty stable condition that you have a job. Of course, in the pandemic, if you're a waiter or you work in tourist industry, this is no longer, having a job is not something stable and unchanging. So we are heavily affected. Many people are heavily affected. While dynamic is something that is the opposite. It's not stable. It's temporary. It's not unchanging, it's changing. For example, run as a verb is very temporary. Try running for 2 days. You will die. You know that the guy who invented the marathon died. He delivered the news to the king and then he died. It's weird that we are actually now, celebrating this marathon run, which actually resulted in the death of its inventor. Demolish. You can demolish something, but you cannot keep demolishing something forever. Also, if you are naughty or if somebody is insolent, you are not going to do it forever. You will have to stop. You fundamentally have to go to sleep at one point. And we generally, as humans, have a positive outlook towards situations. And if a kid is a nuisance, we think that there will be a point in time where the kid will calm down and the kid will be well behaved. So we think that these things such as nuisance, davage, will not be long lasting, they will be temporary. So when you look at this, Mars, tall, stable, unchanging, run, demolish, temporary. So there's a general trend. You don't have to figure this out, by individual words. There are trends among parts of speech. So nouns and adjectives are typically stative. A boat will be a boat. A house will be a house for a long time. If it's a white boat, it will be a white boat for a long time before you have to paint it. So these are all stable, long-lasting states, whereas verbs on the whole are dynamic. I am talking now, but I'm slowly starting to run out of my breath. And when we finish the class, I'll probably, be silent for, I don't know, 2 hours, because I will have to, recover. And by the way, I actually, I had several virus infections, those fancy ones, cytomegalovirus and mononucleosis during the summer. So I'm still recovering and I do not have energy. So I cannot talk forever, but nobody can talk forever. And also, if you're doing something fast or quickly, you get tired, you have to slow down. So the adverbs which describe verbs are also dynamic. Adjectives which describe nouns are, like nouns, stative. But despite this general trend, these things are not carved in stone. This sometimes depends on the context, but not always. Generally, nouns and adjectives are stative, verbs and adverbs are dynamic. But for example, the example which I gave you, now I'm giving it for the 3rd time. She's such a well-behaved child, but today she's so naughty. So naughty in this context is, dynamic, because she's well-behaved generally, and now she's, she's naughty, so it's dynamic. But in a different context, naughty could be stative. She's a naughty child, generally. But today she's behaving. Then behaving is like dynamic. So it depends on the context, but generally, if you forget about these like 5% of context-dependent cases, Mars, Earth, the planet, the house, the boat, the car, these are all stative: running, talking, exercising, walking, everything, almost everything when it comes to verbs is dynamic, except for some verbs such as be. He's a doctor. That's actually stative. So those that have subject complement, he's a doctor, she's a nice person, she's beautiful, he's handsome, is in those sentences is stative. You may ask, okay, Kavgic, I understand. We have to do parts of speech because that's the top level of basic concepts. And we have to understand this stative dynamic, but we get the part about, parts of speech, because they are the building blocks of objects, complements, adverbials. But why stative dynamic? Why is it such a big deal? Well, it is a big deal, partially because it's in your midterm, so your grade depends on it. But outside this course, it is a big deal because it has grammatical consequences. Let me explain. Stative items have a slightly different grammatical or syntactic behavior than dynamic items. So stative items, for example, cannot be used in the progressive aspect. That's why it's terribly and bone-chillingly ungrammatical to say he is knowing English. Similarly, stative items cannot be used to express commands. So stative verbs cannot be used in the imperative mood. You can say learn English, but you cannot say know English, or, you know, be English. So this is actually the reason why we are doing this. So we are doing this because stative and dynamic is relevant to syntax. So stative verbs will never be able to express duration, progressive aspect, and never be able, and also progressive is about temporariness. So that's why we don't use it also. Because if you use a stative item with the progressive aspect, is knowing English, that also implies something temporary, and states are long lasting. And imperative mood, again, because this is a state, you cannot simply turn it on. This is not a PC. In language, states have lasted for a long time before we talk about them, and they will last in the future. So they are not like switches. And that's it when it comes to parts of speech. I tried to explain why this is a big deal, how people came to identify the 10 parts of speech we have in English according to morphological and distribution properties, which is simply about suffixes and how you combine them, and how you have open and closed words. Nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs are open. You create new words such as nubrela, pedalinet in Serbian. Yeah, my daughter is also very creative. The pizza delivery guy for her in Serbian is pizzonosha, which makes perfect sense, right? Now we call all those people pizzonosha. It's a good word. Why would you say čovek koji donosi pizzu when you can say a pizzonosha? When you can already say vodonosha and glasnonosha. So that's actually open, and closed are grammatical parts of speech, such as prepositions, auxiliary verbs, etc. And finally, open word classes, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs. They can be classified into stative and dynamic, which is important because stative items cannot be used in the imperative, so you cannot use them for commands, and they cannot be used in the progressive aspect. You cannot talk about them being temporary or ongoing right now. Questions? I will switch to the chat session. There's but. Dunja Ostojić wrote but. What is the name of the communist pronoun? Okay. Okay. So any questions? I'm really happy that you're following. Sorry, I didn't see the context. No problems there. There's always a but. So I'll follow the 5-second rule. And I added 3 more seconds because of the latency in Google Meet. So I guess that I managed to present this relatively clearly. Of course, I have practice class, sorry, not practice classes. I have office hours today from 5 to 6. So feel free to join, ask something. These days, there are very few people coming, so it's not a crowd. You don't have to wait for more than 3 minutes to get to ask something, sometimes immediately. Okay, in that case, let's move to the next big thing in basic concepts. So parts of speech, they are used to build sentence elements, right? So when you say the boy in the corner is reading a book, the subject consists of the boy in the corner. So it consists of 5 words. But we know that those words are not equally important. So if you say the boy in the corner is reading a book, or the girl in the corner is texting somebody, and if I ask you what this sentence is about, you will not say it's about the corner. You will say it's about the boy or it's about the girl, right? It's not about the, when you say the boy in the corner. It's not about in the boy in the corner. It's always about the boy. Or the girl in the corner is texting, then it's about the girl, what she's doing. So these parts of speech are important, but they somehow are organized into these sentence elements so that there's always one word in that group of words which is somehow more important than the others. This is something that was noticed, 2,000 years ago, even earlier, in Greek and Sanskrit. So we know about this. So these are phrases, but of course not phrases in the sense of, cliches, such as, blurt out, bored up, and something like that. So this site PhrasesNet is actually good if you want to find phrases, casual expressions, and idioms. What we mean by phrases is exactly what I described in the opening slide. So if you, for example, have 3 tigers, you can say tigers. You can say 3 tigers. Or you can say all 3 magnificent Siberian tigers who are looking at me in the morning sun and want to eat me, for example. So in all these 3 phrases, they are always about tigers. So tigers is somehow the main word. So this, tigers, 3 tigers, all 3 magnificent Siberian tigers, blah, blah, blah. If you have to reduce them, you would say they, tigers. And this applies not only to nouns, this applies to, verbs. If you say stops, he's stopping, he may have been being stopped by the police many times, may have been being stopped. You would again say, okay, what are you talking, what really happened? You would say, it's about stopping, so we're talking about stopping. So stops, is stopping, may have been being stopped, they are all verb phrases where stop is really the main element. So that's actually what phrases are. Phrases are parts of sentences, and they can be replaced by pronouns or single word items such as adverbs. So you know this example: the young student will meet his friend at the cafeteria after class. The young student is he, will meet is her, for example, or at the cafeteria is there, and after class is then. The big question is why we do it this way. Why, you don't say the young he will meet his, her at the there, then class. And the reason is, again, what I mentioned, that these phrases are actually always commanded or controlled by a single element, which is the most important element in the phrase. So this is the concept of headedness. You will hear this new meaning of the word head many times every single week throughout your studies. So we say that phrases are syntactic structures headed by a particular lexeme, particular word. This is just a fancy noun instead of word. So headed by a word from a particular part of speech. So when you say tigers, all the 3 magnificent tigers who are basking in the sun, the head of the phrase is tigers. The important thing, and this is actually what is still being discussed, this is not 100% agreed on, so this is where you can get scholarships, get published, become important linguists. Not all parts of speech can be heads of phrases. there are other theories. So we are here following the majority of linguists, but there are, let's say, 20 or 30% of linguists, especially in the domain of generative linguistics, that have, again, not all generative linguists, but some of them have the idea that actually every every part of speech is the head of a particular phrase. So traditionally, and when I say traditionally, that means majority of linguists over the last 50 years think that only nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and prepositions can function as heads of phrases. These days, and probably, you know, I may change these slides in the next year or 2 years down the road, there's a growing consensus that there are also determiners, that there are determiner phrases. But traditionally, and also in computational linguistics, in machine translation, in IT generally, all those engines that you use, like Google Search, Google Translate, they actually recognize, although you don't see it, but if you read articles about how they operate, you will learn that they actually identify these 5 phrases: a noun phrase or an NP, verb phrase or a VP, adjective phrase or AP, adverb phrase or ADP, and prepositional phrase, which sounds like, you know, what again they say Donald Trump did in Russia, the golden shower event, which maybe did not happen, maybe happened, PP, the PP tape. So after Donald Trump, I'm embarrassed to use the abbreviated form PP, but that's actually what we say, PP, prepositional phrase. For some reason, I always think of Donald Trump. I watch news too much. So what we say, okay, these phrases, NP, VP, AP, ADP, PP, these are, you know, phrases headed by a noun, by a verb, by an adjective, by an adverb, or preposition. But what is this head? What do we mean by the head? We intuitively understand it, but, you know, scientifically we have to, you know, explain it in a way. So we say that the head is the element that lends its properties to the phrase as a whole. So I will try to explain also why linguists chose the word head to explain this. So do you know this lady? Anybody? Maybe it's small. Okay, how about this lady?
Lady Gaga.
Lady
Yeah.
Gaga.
Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga, 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 and one more, Lady Gaga. So, see, only the first photo is actually what, you know, what in linguistics would be when you say tigers. Everything else is when you say all 3 magnificent tigers who are basking in the sun and who want to eat me, you know, are beautiful. They are beautiful. Those tigers are beautiful. So this is the reason why we call it the head. So there's something there which is basic. And then you will do many weird things to this head. You will add different colors, different shades. You will add mud to it, you know, in this central photo where she has this white police hat. She has some, looks like, you know, dried baby food over her face. So, you know, you do weird things to the head, but it's still your head. It's still Lady Gaga. You will not say this is, I don't know, give me another. This is not Katy Perry. This is Katy Perry. This isn't Katy Perry. This is still Lady Gaga. So this is what we mean by head. This is what we mean when we say that the head lends its properties to the whole. I have another example. So you can say Homer. You can say Homer Simpson. Of course, I'm talking about this guy. Homer Simpson, who is the head of the Simpsons family. Homer Simpson, who is the head of a family going by the name Simpsons. A person called Homer Simpson, who's the head of a family of 4, going by the name Simpsons, currently living in Springfield. Or a person called Homer Simpson, who's the head of the family of 4, going by the name Simpsons, whose other members are Bart, Marge, Lisa, and Maggie, currently living in Springfield. You can simply say just called, or he just called. So everything that you have on the left-hand side will always be replaced by he, because the head is Homer. And no matter how big a phrase you make, you will always replace it with he, because you know that a person called Homer Simpson, who's the head of the family, the head of that phrase is Homer. It's a he. You will, although we mention Marge, for example, and Lisa, you will never replace a person called Homer Simpson, who's the head of the family. You will never say she. So we do this intuitively. We process these huge amounts of language data. We establish the relationship, and we understand this long stretch of language as simply a male who goes by the name Homer. He. That's it. He. So this is true for 90% of phrases. The head lends its properties to the phrase. So the phrase has the syntactic characteristics of the head. Adjective phrase behaves like an adjective. So if you say like Lady Gaga is amazingly and mind-bogglingly talented, you can simply say Lady Gaga is talented. Talented here, by the way, is not a verb. It's an adjective, because it's not a passive, because you cannot say, Lady Gaga is talented, somebody talents Lady Gaga. So talented is actually an adjective. It looks like a passive construction when you say she is talented, but talented is an adjective. You can prove it. You can modify talented, unlike, for example, a verb. When you say, let's say, Lady Gaga is very talented, very is an adverb which modifies an adjective. You cannot do that to verbs. You cannot say, let's say, Bob got killed. You cannot say Bob got very killed. You see, very is not really compatible with killed, because killed is not an adjective. Killed is a verb. So very often, in most cases, 90% of the cases, the phrase acts like the head. Adjective phrase acts like an adjective, which is its head. Noun phrase acts like the noun, which is its head. Homer, tigers. There's one exception. That's why I mentioned 90%. That exception is the prepositional phrase. The prepositional phrase doesn't act like the head of the preposition. So you cannot delete the rest of the prepositional phrase, just keep the preposition, and it will have the same meaning, more or less, not the same meaning, but it will fundamentally have the same meaning. So this is called, there's a fancy name for this phenomenon. We say that some phrases are endocentric and some phrases are exocentric. So endocentric are those that, really the head of the phrase is like, the whole phrase is like the head of the phrase. So one word in the phrase is equivalent to the whole phrase. The old car is still a car. The old guard, if you watch the movie, Charlize Theron, very good movie on Netflix. So the old guard is still a guard. And exocentric phrases, that's only the prepositional phrase. The whole phrase is not in its meaning equivalent to a single phrase. So when you say in the park, it's not in. When you say we met in the park, you cannot say we met in. But if you say the beautiful park at the edge of the city is where we usually meet, you can say the park is where we usually meet, or That's it. You know, you don't have to do all that other stuff to the park. You don't have to add all those details. The only exception is prepositional phrase. In the park. It's not in. In is the preposition. Preposition is the head of the prepositional phrase. So this in the park is not in. You will have to substitute it with an adverbial. So endocentric phrases are the majority of phrases, MP, APS, PVP. So in all these cases, the phrase acts like the head. Tigers, beautiful tigers, it's still tigers. Amazingly beautiful is still beautiful. Very quickly is still quickly. Must have been loved is still loved. In the park is not in. In the park, you replace it with there. Where did we meet? We met there. What do you mean there? In the park. In the park is not in. You replace it with there or some other word. So that's, you see, that's the difference. So I have some examples to exemplify. Dust in the corner has been vacuumed. You can say dust has been vacuumed. This is amazing and incredibly beautiful. You can simply say this is beautiful. It's still equivalent to the whole phrase. If you say, let's say, Flash is running extremely and truly mind-bogglingly quickly, you can say Flash runs quickly. It's not the same meaning, but fundamentally the root of the meaning is the same. He must have loved her. He loved her. It doesn't mean the same, but it's still the head of the phrase is love. It's all about loving. So the head of the phrase is equivalent to the function of the whole group, except for prepositional phrases. In the corner is not in. In January is not in. If you say the present is in the corner, you cannot say the present is in. You have to say the present in there is there. We have a meeting in January. You cannot say we are having meeting in. You have to say we're having meeting then, and then it means in January. So the head is not functionally equivalent to the whole phrase. So that's it. I have some additional examples where I just prove the same point, that you cannot say the man fell from the railing, the man fell from. Okay, we have 15 minutes remaining, and I have 7 slides remaining on the last topic of the basic concepts in grammar. But are there any comments, suggestions, new questions, anything that you may want to share right now? No? 8 seconds due to latency in Google Meet. Okay, so we then move to the basic concepts, and not any basic concepts, the last of the basic concepts. Believe it or not, we will end basic concepts today. Yippee-ki-yay. So what is assertion and non-assertion? Let's go back in time. Those linguists on whose shoulders we are standing, they had a lot of spare time on their hands. They didn't have social media, YouTube, Netflix, so they managed to, focus a lot on science. So what they noticed is when you look at sentences such as, I know some facts about South Park. I don't know any facts about South Park. They are grammatical, but you cannot say, I know any facts about South Park. So there's something, and you cannot say, I don't have some bread. Or you cannot also say, learn any facts about South Park. But there's something weird about some and any. They notice that, some somehow appears only when you are stating pure facts. And when you are talking about something that is negative, or you ask about something, then instead of some, you use any. And they notice that there are many words in English, not like thousands of words, but there are words in English that behave like some, and there are words that behave like any. this is not true in all languages. This is relatively specific to Germanic. There are also some Slavic languages with this feature. I mean, the general story on assertive and non-assertive sentences is universal, but the way it's realized in English is, let's say, specific to English. The words are sometimes different in other languages. So those people that were looking at the behavior of some and any notice that fundamentally every sentence you can think of can be analyzed as being either declarative or not declarative. So declarative is when you state facts. Non-declarative is when you are not stating facts. That's actually a question. When you ask a question, you don't know. Like, how much does it cost? You don't know. You don't know the price tag. But then, you know, the salesperson will return a declarative sentence and will tell you, this cell phone, it costs 1,100 euros. You want to buy an iPhone 11 Max Pro. So that's declarative versus not declarative. So questions are when you don't know the facts, you don't declare anything. Statements are declarative. This phone costs 1,100 euros. That's a fact. I cannot afford it. So positive and not positive. That's another, you know, classification of every single sentence. You know, when you hear the question tag the price tab, the price tag of the phone, you can say, okay, I can buy it. That's positive. Oh man, that's way too much. I can't afford it. That's not positive. That's negative. So every sentence is either declarative or not declarative, positive or not positive. In other words, negative. So there's one feature, declarative or positive, that is either true or false. You know, I know that we all probably dislike mathematics. But this is actually partially from mathematics. So this is actually what we call binary opposition. So it means that every sentence is either plus or minus declarative, plus or minus positive. Plus positive means positive, minus positive is negative. Plus declarative is declarative, minus declarative is interrogative. So in other words, this is the analysis which we have, and hopefully it will appear. Yes. So declarative, not declarative, positive, negative. So if you represent it, as I mentioned, plus, minus, positive, declarative, then every sentence in English is belonging to one of these boxes that you see. So every single sentence, SVO, SVA, SVC, SVO, whatever sentence pattern you're talking about, this applies to every single sentence, will be either declarative and positive. So it will be a statement and it's a positive statement. And this is what we call assertive. And this is the only type of sentence where words like some can occur. So you say, I have some money. In all other boxes, one of these parameters is minus. So if you have plus declarative, minus positive, you cannot say, I have some money. You have to replace some with something negative. So you have to say, I have no money. No makes it minus positive, or in other words, negative. Minus declarative plus positive, that's a normal question. Minus declarative means it's not a statement. Plus positive means it's a positive question. So that's called non-assertive positive and interrogative. That's like, do you have any money? And finally, it can be both minus declarative and minus positive, in other words, negative. That's a non-assertive negative question or non-assertive negative interrogative sentence. That's a fancy expression. Don't you have any money? Like, we maxed our credit cards. What's wrong? We cannot enter. Don't you have any money? That's, again, the sentence where you have to use any. So this is what assertion and non-assertion is about. So there are words such as some, which can only appear in a positive and declarative sentence. And then there are words such as no and any, which can only occur when it's either not a statement or it's a negated question. So that's called non-assertive. So assertive is only positive and declarative. Everything else is non-assertive. Now, why are we doing this? Why is this important? Why are we, spending time talking about it in basic concepts? Again, the same drill. Firstly, there's an exercise. You will earn some points by doing this and analyzing. But the reason why we are doing this is that it also has syntactic consequences. And of course, this means that, if you use some in a positive declarative sentence, it's okay. But if you use some in a negative interrogative sentence, it's ungrammatical. So just like stative and dynamic, it has syntactic consequences. So you may think it's simple, but it's not always that simple. So you can make a mistake unless you concentrate, or unless you concentrate, you will make a mistake. Is this assertive or non-assertive? I don't see a negation. It's not a question. It may look assertive, right? But actually, maybe it's not. Similarly, if you say, I hardly know her, and the car's barely touched, and a sentence from a novel I read recently, he gripped his brother's arm lest he be trampled by the mob. It's about some weird events in Middle East. So these sentences look positive. They don't contain words such as no, never, none. There is nothing of this of the same kind like any, anyone, etc. But they are actually all non-assertive, because unless means if not. So unless you concentrate actually in your mind, it means if you do not concentrate, you will make a mistake. So it's non-assertive. I hardly know her fundamentally means I don't really know her. So it's actually non-assertive. The cars barely touched means that they actually did touch. So although barely, you're trying to present it in a positive way, but actually you did have a crash. So you will not avoid the court proceedings. You will have to pay. So it's non-assertive. Barely means that actually the opposite is true. And he grabbed his brother's arm lest he be trampled by the mob. Lest is a very old-fashioned word, which means in order not to be trampled by the mob. So this is, all these sentences are non-assertive. So this is what makes life complicated. Most words can be used in both assertive and non-assertive sentences. But there are words which are only assertive, which is what linguists with a lot of spare time on their hands notice. Some, still, two, already, a great number of, a lot of. These are positive only, declarative only words. They are called assertive items. And there are words which only occur in non-assertive sentences. These are some adverbs, determiners, again, and pronouns. Such as never, not, no. And this is relatively straightforward. The tricky part is that there are determiners, adverbs, pronouns that seem to be assertive, but are actually non-assertive. We call them implicitly negative. This is hardly, any, yet, either, barely, unless, the things you saw in the previous slide. Don't worry, we will practice this. We have more than 12 sentences, no, 15 sentences to practice this on for the midterm exam. So in practice classes, we will do it. So next week, we will wrap up the basic concepts in grammar. I will give you an overview. I'm trying to prepare a mind map so that we go through it and you understand where everything is located, on what it depends on. And next week, if you can join, please join again live stream, because you will be again able to ask questions. I will present the midterm exam. I will show you last year's midterm exam, and you will be able to see exactly the types of questions that you will have, how many in each exercise. I will also tell you how we grade this. So you know, whether you will, if you miss something, whether you will get 0 points or you will get half a point. So we will spend, I think, at least 45 or 50 minutes on the midterm overview. We will go through it exercise by exercise. So this will be also like a practice class. So be ready. Make sure your microphones work or your keyboards are well oiled and you can type in questions in the chat window. But before that, I already mentioned this in groups A and C, I think, where I teach practice classes on Tuesdays. But the head of the faculty wanted me to remind you about something. But since I got this information, the situation has deteriorated. If you watch the news, you know that yesterday was the worst day in Serbia in terms of the coronavirus numbers. So, you know, the management of the faculty asked the professors to address the elephant in the room, which looks like this. People from practice, they already saw these slides. The problem with elephant in the room is that usually, due to its part, that it's awkward, we try to avoid it, we are reluctant to acknowledge it, we deny it exists, we are ignorant about what it does, it's a diversion, we like to treat it with silence, and it's got a trunk. So the reason why I'm telling you this is that we have some issues at the faculty. I don't know the details, but it seems that some people are positive among students and that they actually infected their parents. And if the numbers go up as they are going up, we may, it's possibility now, we didn't actually think it would happen, but there's a possibility that in November, we may have to lock down the faculty and return to online classes only. So what they asked me to do in Serbian is to ask you to be responsible. So even if you don't care about your health because you're young and you will not be severely affected, think about possibility of infecting your parents. So wear a mask, wash your hands, don't throw parties of more than 5 people, and if you don't know their status. And if we don't do that together, we may have to switch to online classes in November because of the lockdown. So just wear it. The end. Questions? Comments? Sorry about this, but somebody got infected from their parents. My God. That's not nice. That's not nice. It should always be the other way around. You should infect your parents because you have a life and they don't always have a life. I despise this situation too. It's very difficult. So, you know, I love teaching. I really find this hard that I actually, you know, I adore lectures. I would like to do these lectures in you know, in the auditorium where we can, you know, stop and you can ask and, you know, you can comment. This is not so natural. So let's try to defeat this virus together, be responsible, and I am confident that we will continue seeing each other on Tuesdays, face to face, indoors at the faculty. So thank you. I will now stop the recording. So if you want to start swearing, wait for it.